Hi everyone, welcome back. So hopefully yesterday you saw your Amoeba Sisters video on the cell cycle. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through the notes of the cell cycle so that I can explain it a little bit more clearly. And that way also you have some definitions about what the cell cycle does. So let's go ahead and get started. You're going to go ahead and go to your red notes folder and open up your cell cycle notes. So you should have seen the previous videos that went over your structure of DNA, how it's condensed, that way it fits inside the nucleus, and the difference between diploid and haploid cells. So now we're actually going to see what process does a cell take in order to reproduce. So on this particular slide, so we could see that I have a diagram of the cell cycle, and it's, exactly what it sounds like. It's a cycle. So if I pick one phase, so like let's say G1, it's going to be going clockwise. So it'll go from G1 phase to S phase, G2, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis, and it just keeps on going and going. So my cell cycle, the purpose of this is for my cell to be able to grow and eventually be able to divide. So I'm going to go ahead and type that definition right here. Okay, so my cell cycle is a process a cell takes to grow and divide. Okay. So cells need a lot in order to be able to grow and in order to be able to divide. And so usually when we're talking about the cell cycle, we can have two major phases. So our two major phases are called interphase and M phase. Okay, so two major phases, interphase and M phase. I'm going to run out of room. Okay, so I'm going to just move my little text box just a little bit. Okay, so interphase and M phase. All right. So if I look at my diagram, I could see interphase takes up my G1, S, and G2. Okay, so it takes up the majority of my cycle. M phase, which is over here on the left, consists of my mitosis and cytokinesis. Okay, so M phase, M for mitosis. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our interphase. Let's start with G1, S, and G2. So we can see in our diagram during G1, this is when my cell is growing. Okay, so that's the purpose of my G1 phase. Okay, so my cell and organelles grow. Okay, so I'm talking about physically getting bigger. All right, so they are growing. During S phase, I can see right here on my diagram, I have DNA replication. So remember, the point of the cell cycle is to make a clone or a copy of my original cell. So that means that my baby cell also has to have an exact DNA replication from the parent cell. So that DNA has to be the same. If it's not the same, there's something wrong with that cell and that cell won't function the way it's supposed to. So during S phase, my cell is going to go through a process called DNA replication. Okay, so this is the phase where my DNA is copied for my new cell. Okay, so DNA replication, that's what happens during S phase. So my cell isn't quite fully grown yet. It needs to keep on growing. So during G2, okay, so we have more growth. Cell grows. And what's really cool about G2, my organelles double here. Okay, because if we're having a new cell, they have to have their own organelles. Okay, so cell grows, my organelles double. And if I'm looking at interphase, I could see G2 is actually my shortest phase in interphase. Okay, so G2 doesn't take very long. So next, my cell cycle is going to leave interphase and it's going to go into the M phase. Okay, so it's going to go through cell division. It's going to go through mitosis. Okay, so my M phase is the process of cell division. Okay, so my cell needs to divide. Now I have a bigger cell. I have double the DNA, double the organelles. It's ready to divide. So if you still have stuff to type out, go ahead and pause this. If not, we're going to go ahead and move on. So here's my diagram again. Okay, so my interphase I know is divided into 3 phases. We already went over what each of those phases stood for. Okay, so I have my G1 phase. Okay, so G for grow. S phase. Okay, so remember S is when my DNA is replicated or synthesized. And G2. Okay, so G2 is when my organelles double and my cell is preparing to go through mitosis. So if I actually look at mitosis, mitosis is divided into 4 phases. Okay, so my 4 phases are prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Okay, so also known as PMAT. Okay, so if you ever need to know the order, just think of PMAT. Okay, so this is the correct order. We are going to go over mitosis next week, so don't worry about those notes just yet. Just know that this is the order for mitosis. So during mitosis, what's happening is my nucleus is dividing. I had double DNA. DNA is housed in the nucleus, so I need to be able to split that DNA up perfectly. So in mitosis, my DNA is dividing. We call mitosis nuclear division. During cytokinesis, this is when my cytoplasm divides. So it's the process when cytoplasm divides. So if I look at these 2 pictures that are right here, okay, so I have an animal cell, and I remember animal cells have cell membranes around them. So what ends up happening is my cell membrane is going to pinch around that cytoplasm, and it's going to break off into 2 cells. My plant cell, however, has a cell wall. So not only does that cell membrane on the inside need to separate, I also need to construct a new cell wall. So right in the middle of that plant cell, I'm going to have a wall start to form, and that's called a cell plate. So during cytokinesis, that cell plate is going to fully form, and now I have a new cell wall, and now I have 2 new cells. So something that you probably remember from the Amoeba Sisters video from yesterday is that not all cells go through the cell cycle. The cell cycle is for cells that need to be able to reproduce or be able to replicate, or replace old and damaged cells. But not all of our cells do that. So for example, if you think of your brain cells, our brain cells, once they're fully formed, it's very difficult to create, or form new cells. That's one of the reasons why when somebody has an accident and, suffers from some brain injury, or when somebody has a concussion, it's a very long healing process. And so cells like that are in what we call the G0 phase or the go phase. So we call it the go phase, but really it's stopped. So this is when our cells are dormant. Okay, so they're no longer going through the cell cycle. Okay, so they've stopped replicating. They've stopped, synthesizing new DNA. Their organelles are as big and you have as many as you need, so you're not going to make any new cells. So sometimes you have some cells that can exit the G0 phase. So if you have an injury, or maybe you get sick, so you have some cells that can exit the G0 phase, make more cells, and then they can go back dormant again. So the G0 phase is outside of the cell cycle. Sometimes you'll see an arrow drawn here at the bottom, and you'll see, an arrow to the G0 phase. And so that just infers that it's outside of the cell cycle. So go ahead, finish typing up these notes. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next week.